Welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Today we're going to hear from a plumber who loves horror stories, a former techie who finally lets her creative mind run wild, a man who had more careers than he ever thought possible, a joke enthusiast who brings back the funny from the 90s, and a caregiver with coping skills. But first, you never know what you might find after the death of a loved one. When sisters Phyllis G. Yoshida and Marilyn G. Genther cleaned out their mom's house after she died, they found a journal. It was written by an activist who was way ahead of her time and inspired them to write Destination Europe 1932, before everything changed. Phyllis, you wrote a couple of academic books when you were working for the government, so you certainly know your way around writing, but this was completely different. Tell me about Marjorie Stewart Palmer.
Okay, well, she was our neighbor when we were growing up. And she never had any kids, but was always really kind to all of us, inviting us in to see things. And I knew that she worked at the university and did cooperative education. But after she died, she left my mother her journal and various things. And when my sister and I were cleaning out my mother's house after she died, we found it. My sister had vaguely remembered that Marjorie had given, these things to my mom. And we sat down and read it and realized it really shouldn't be lost.
This woman was so far ahead of her time. Tell me about her.
Yeah, she graduated from high school, which most people did not then. She went to the University of Cincinnati, which is still a municipal university, but it allowed women to come in, one of the first ones. And while she was there finishing, she worked as a secretary for the Dean of Engineering. And he was so impressed with her when he decided to expand the cooperative education program they had for men, which was the first one in the world, by the way. He asked her to help set up and run the women's program.
Wow. And then she did a European grand tour.
Right. She and her husband, who was also a professor at the university, in 1932 had a 6-month sabbatical, and they decided to drive around Europe.
And what did she find?
It's a mixture of things. She talked about what they did, which was certainly, a grand tour in terms of visiting places, going to the opera, exploring museums, churches, eating great food. There's a lot about her, what food she ate. But she also, because it was her sabbatical, she stopped along the way to meet with some European women who were running similar programs to help women get an education and get into the workforce. Women after World War I who were educated felt very strongly that there should be more women in the workforce, and that would help bring about peace.
Yes.
So she was very much in the sort of that mode. But as she's driving around, she sees Mussolini's skies, she sees Hitler's skies, and, was very observant, too. So it was like a quiet period that was, about to blow up.
Yeah, the calm before the storm. And she's kind of...
Right, exactly.
It seems like she sensed that.
Yes.
Yeah. Unless you were there,
yeah.
I guess it was easier to be ignorant, right?
I think so. Like most people she drove around and talked to, were still... there was one woman in Munich who I believe was probably Jewish who told her all about Hitler. But the others were sort of, just going around doing their lives.
Right.
The one thing that she did do on this trip was go to the Third International Conference of Women in Scotland, which were all of these sort of educated women who were trying to do the same thing she was, and she was one of the U.S. representatives.
Wow. Did she ever come into contact with Eleanor Roosevelt?
I don't think so, but she's definitely in that mode.
She's in that league. Yeah. Yeah. What was your most surprising finding?
Her sense of humor.
Oh.
She really, she writes beautifully, but she would we had to buy a louder horn to get the cows out of the way.
I believe that. Have you been to Europe? Have you ever been stopped by pigs in the middle of the street? I have.
So her sense of humor, I think, and really how much she was involved in the women's movement. Like I said, growing up, she was retired and we knew her. And I knew she worked in the co-op program, but I didn't realize she was the one who helped set it up and run it.
Wow.
And had been in all these, like the Association of American University Women. She was a very active member in doing these things, which I didn't really know until I read this.
So how are you telling people about it?
I envisioned myself going around and talking, perhaps, to women's groups. We definitely wanted the people at the University of Cincinnati to remember who she was.
Yes.
Not just her boss who set up the original men's program. But I've gotten a lot of interest from, actually, I'm a member of AAUW, from those type of women who are sort of interested in this type of thing. I've gotten a couple interests from historians, because this is sort of one of the few that I've ever seen diaries from this particular time.
Yeah.
In Europe. So I probably need to start getting out more, but it just came out just recently. So
yeah.
Yet.
I'm just amazed at, the educated women from this time period were so determined, and they were out there and they were talking and they were making a difference, and they were meeting in groups and they were discussing all kinds of things. I mean, William Howard Taft's wife, Nellie Taft, before she had some sort of, I think she had a stroke or something, was one of the most interesting first ladies I ever read about. These women, they were so unique for their time, and we never heard about them.
Right, exactly, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to write this. They were sort of quiet activists,
yes,
working to a great extent within the system, but did a lot of things, I think, that made it easier for all of us later on.
Now, you did a ton of research for this book. Who were some of the people she came into contact with? Well,
she met, for example, and played bridge with the man who ran the Berlin office of MGM.
Oh,
and there's a whole book about him. Evidently, he gave up his first wife to the Nazis.
Oh, nice.
And a World War I general who, when I looked him up and found him finally, he was in the New York Times when he died because he had done so much in World War I. And he's a famous artist who did beautiful things. Then I realized a couple of that person's oils are at the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, geez.
And the art museum. So it was interesting to see all the connections. I couldn't find everybody.
Were you able to find pictures?
Yes, I have one picture in the book of that. And I put in, actually, most of the pictures in the book are the postcards she sent home.
Oh.
Which her mother or her brother, must have kept because they were together with the journal.
Huh. So interesting. Wow. Thank you so much. Phyllis G. Yoshida and Marilyn G. Genther, authors of Destination Europe, 1932, Before Everything Changed. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Scott Caronna will tell you no one looks at him and sees a writer. Yet here he is to talk about his book of 9 horror stories designed to leave the reader uncomfortable for hours and days after they finish reading it. It is entitled Shadow Behind the Eyes. Scott, you're a plumber. You're out all hours of the day and night. When do you write?
So funny enough, I wake up early in the morning. So depending on what time my shift is, I wake up an hour before I have to leave so I can write in the morning. And then I take my iPad to work with me, and I'll write on my lunch break. And then usually in the evenings, I try to set aside 45 minutes to write.
How long have you been doing that?
For about 4 years, give or take.
What made you start doing that?
Crippling depression and anxiety.
Really?
Yeah. So back in 2018, my best friend passed away suddenly. And I didn't know what to do with myself, and I went into a really dark spiral. And then in 2021, 2022, I just started thinking about different things, and I started writing down my feelings, and I just kind of realized I had a talent for writing and just took off with it.
Well, you have a talent for writing and apparently a love for horror films. Are you like a horror buff?
No, I'm scared of everything.
You're scared, but this is all about horror and fear.
Yeah, well, so my wife is a horror aficionado. I can't handle horror very well. But a lot of times, like, I'll be like driving down the highway, or I'll be like doing something with buddies, and I'll just kind of think of a random idea, and then that will spawn itself into sort of an outline. And then from the outline, I'll be able to write a story. So, kind of interesting fact, I've actually written 4 full-length books. Only one of them is published. The other 3, one of them is a full novel, and the other 2 after that is more short horror stories that I've just collected and am working on editing.
Okay, so do you have a standout horror story for us that illustrates your capacity to leave the reader uncomfortable for hours and days after finishing each piece?
I do, actually. I just finished a piece this morning.
Okay.
So the premise is a young gentleman. He is orphaned because his father gets possessed by a demon, and the father kills his mother. And a group of priests find the child, and they take him to a church where he's adopted by a marble worker. Well, the boy has a talent for woodworking, ends up working in this wood shop, and you find out that the wood shop works with wood that's blessed by the Pope. So one day, the woodworker goes down to get more blessed wood, and he discovers that there is a wall that separates the forest from this black veiled area. Well, he sneaks in there and discovers that people that were possessed by demons that didn't get the demon out of them, their bodies get planted in the earth below Vatican City, and a tree grows out of it, but their soul is still trapped inside the tree.
Oh, no.
And the guy, so he becomes obsessed with these trees, and he starts talking to them, and they start explaining how, like, the demons are still in them, but some of the demons can't withstand the holy energy that the Pope has blessed them with. The demon will leave, but the person's soul can't leave the wood. So the guy gets commissioned to build a sacred box, which is to hold the Eucharist during Easter or Christmas vigil. He becomes obsessed with it, and eventually he goes into the garden, he cuts down one of the trees of the people inside. And the person is screaming the whole time. He's covered in like sap and blood, and he creates this box. And one night he's laying there, the box starts growing roots, and the guy disappears. And of course, his apprentice doesn't know where he went. So as the years go by, and the apprentice goes down to get more blessed wood, and he hears the guy's voice on the other side of the wall.
Oh, my God. Is he there forever?
Yeah, the guy is trapped in the tree, and his apprentice just hears him talking to him, but he doesn't know where he is.
Oh, my gosh. I'm assuming you go out and you talk about your book, right?
I do, constantly.
Do you do like a whole scary turn the lights down at your house and invite people over? What do you do? Do you put flashlights under your chin and sit around a fire?
It's funny you say that. So my mother-in-law and my wife's grandparents, they're avid readers. So they'll host like little fire pit nights, and we'll do like cheese and wine and stuff like that. And I'll read pieces to them. And I have like a list of stories, and they'll go through and they'll pick one they haven't heard, and I'll read snippets from them. So part of the thing that I enjoy about my writing, or a big part of it to me, is that I will sometimes I do religious context, and I try to spin religious ideologies into something creepy.
Right.
Other times, so one of my favorite stories, which my wife had said, she was curious as to why it's not in my first book. It's about a guy who, he worked in a coal mine because his parents were old and sickly. And one day he's working down there, and he hears a woman say to him, "Your mother loves you." And he like looks around, obviously doesn't see anybody. When he goes home, he finds out that his mom has cancer. He's going to die. So he says, I'm going to make something of myself. He's like, I love science. And his father says, there's a nuclear plant opening up in town. Maybe you could become a nuclear scientist. So the boy goes to school, tries to get the associate's degree, goes to the plant, and they say, look, you need to get a doctorate. But until then, you can work as a nuclear waste disposal agent. So he's doing that, but the suits are really bad. So he starts getting sick a little bit. He's kind of struggling. Well, one day they tell him, you can be an overnight junior assistant. So he works in the plant, and he starts seeing this woman on the monitor. And she says, I know your mother. You would make her proud. Well, the guy falls in love with the woman on the screen, and she starts telling him how he has to release her from the prison that the men have trapped her in.
Oh.
So he continually goes down into the core, and he proceeds to get radiation sickness, and eventually he goes down to the core, and there's a security guard and says, like, you can't go in there. On a blind rage, the guy killed the security guard, steals the badge, goes in there, and he sees her. And she said, take off your helmet, the radiation helmet. I want to see you in your full glory. So he takes the helmet off. He passes out. When he wakes up, the doctors have removed his eyes.
Oh.
So he's laying in the bed, and he sees the woman, her glow, in front of him. And she says, follow my glow. You will find me in the core. You have to release me. So the guy crawls out of bed, goes into the core, and he jumps into the core.
Oh.
And as he's falling, he lights a match and throws it. So he hits the ground, and everything is now on fire. And he hears the alarm say, the core is melting down. And he says to him, say my name for the world to hear. And he says, my beloved Chernobyl. That's like one of my favorite pieces.
Oh, my gosh. All right. So you have enough stories for 2 more books, right? And you're good with Fulton?
Absolutely. It's been very rewarding. I've learned a lot about myself, a lot about patience and sort of like being meticulous and editing and editing and editing and editing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really, it helped me kind of feel comfort that like I'm chasing this dream and this passion. And my goal is to actually start a brand. So Shadow Behind the Eyes is the book title. And eventually I want to turn that into like a branding opportunity. So my next book would be Shadow Behind the Eyes Presents, the next book title. I actually have a friend of mine who's a tattoo artist. We are putting together prints, stickers, t-shirts, hats, hoodies of images that she's pulled from each story and drawn that we can sell them along with the book.
This sounds like Comic-Con material.
It's close. So the artwork on the front of my book is to my friend that drew that. He's doing all the prints for me.
Okay. Any advice for writers out there?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is be humble when you're writing. Don't get discouraged. I tell people all the time, we as authors and artists think that we've created the greatest thing on the planet. And while it's great to love your work, be humble and accept rejection as part of the process and learn and grow from it.
Nice. Do you accept criticism? Do you have people criticize your stories and then go back and write them, rewrite?
Absolutely. My brother is one of the biggest, he's one of the harshest critics I've ever met. Like, he'll lean into me if I write something. And, you know, I try to have people proofread, and if something doesn't work or someone says, hey man, you know, this character doesn't make sense. Like, what is his motivation? Or like, what is happening in this scene? I'll sit there and meticulously create a better version of that art so that I can give the reader the best thing they can receive.
Yeah.
I've been talking to a bunch of local bookstores here in Maryland. A couple of them want to host me for book signings. I just haven't had the chance to sort of set any of that stuff up yet, but would love to do that.
I will tell you this, not all book stores are willing to host you. So if you've got some people interested, follow up on that.
Yeah, I have two places. Two places that actually have hard copies of my book, and they put them on the website. And
Great.
Both of them have said, yeah. So I go out in the evenings and I'll like talk to different local bookstores. Like, I'll travel around carrying copies of my book. And I'm like, look, here's what I'm doing. Actually, there's a website called Any Means Necessary. They do a lot of like merchandising, t-shirts, branding, stuff like that. And one of the guys that worked there wrote a book about mental health, and it's illustrated. And I fell in love with the artwork. So I'm sending them a copy of my book along with some prints and stickers that my friend made in a bid to see if they're willing to work with me to promote my book sort of on a bigger scale.
Great. Well, I know you're going to keep writing, so I'm not even going to ask. Scott Caronna, author of Shadow Behind the Eyes. Thank you.
Of course. It's been fun. I really enjoy having the coronavirus connected to my last name.
What could be better than that?
It's been terrific.
That's a horror movie right there.
Yeah, it really is.
Get on that.
I'm working on it. Thank you very much, Alex. I appreciate it.
A former computer programmer, Judy Lundquist, had a creative burst after retirement that resulted in her first published book. It is entitled Open Road, A Journey of Tragedy and Hope. All right, Judy, how'd this book come about?
Well, to be honest with you, I've always had this, like, the work that I did was always so linear. It was just like, just mathematical, analytical, blah, blah, blah. And I always had this like urge to just be more creative. And so one day I was just walking in the park, and this whole story came to me, just because I see things in scenes in movies. And so that's kind of how it started. And then I just started putting it down on paper, because my mind's always going. So it was a way to get it out of my mind. So that's how I did it.
So what'd you come up with?
Well, I had a couple of stories, but that Orphan Road is the one that I actually just saw it as a movie, and that's the one I just wrote. It wouldn't leave me. So, but it kind of was because I think it resonated to personal, like trying to find myself sort of thing.
Your opening line is, after working years at an IT job she hates. Do you relate to that at all?
Yes, because that was me. Actually, the first half of the book is much of it is my personal experience. Probably 80% of it is based on real life.
Okay. So where does this orphanage come in?
To be honest with you, right after college, I signed up to go into the Peace Corps because I wanted to work with orphan children. And so I was all set to go to the island of Fiji, believe it or not. And then I think it was 2 weeks or so before I was supposed to go, they didn't get the funding, or something fell through. And then I ended up being a math teacher, which eventually, and then got into programming. But I always felt like I missed my calling, like I was supposed to be doing that. And so that's part of how I think it played in with the book, because it was part of the woman's journey in the book to find what she's supposed to be doing.
Okay. So she ends up in South America at this orphanage. Tell me your story. How do you lay out this book?
Well, then when she goes to South America, that's when a lot of unexpected events happen in her life, and she has some decisions to make, because she's not sure that this was where she was supposed to be, and she wants to go back home. And in the meantime, her boyfriend, it counterplays with her boyfriend that she left because she felt betrayed by him, and they're still communicating. And then he has his own life struggles that he's going through, but she's unaware of that. So it's his decisions on things, on what's going on in his life, and her decisions on what she's going to do with her life, whether she's going to stay there or whether she's going to come back to a more comfortable life. And in the interim, there's a shaman there that they have a love-hate relationship, and he plays a role in determining some of what she decides to do also.
On one hand, she's ready to pack up and go home. She misses this boyfriend, but the shaman says she has to stay. So we find out how much of a role he plays in her decision. And we find that, does this book end here?
It wraps up, but it has an epilogue to it. It does have a conclusion.
All right. Any thoughts on promoting your book?
Being a very introverted person, it's hard for me to do that. But I have learned that I have to get out there. So it's funny. I haven't really said much, but people have just come to me because other friends of friends have told them, and so it gets around. It got around in the community that I'm in, and some of my relatives have spread the word. So that's kind of how it is. But I don't go out shouting it from the rooftops, because that's just not my nature.
The publisher does a lot of stuff for you anyway, but I'm always interested to find out what authors might have in mind, what creative things they might come up with. Like, authors will tell me, I went to the local book club and, told them I wrote this book, and because they were local or because they knew somebody in the book club, the book club bought the book, read it, and then the author came in and discussed it. If you're in a community where people know you and you would feel comfortable with a small gathering or going to the local library, is that something you've considered? If you're shy, I know that's difficult, but there's a lot of levels here too. This book is about how you found yourself. This book is based on experiences that you had. This is a book you could take to a woman's group.
Mm-hmm.
You can also talk about the process of writing and, how what you did, there was no creative outlet, and how writing this book provided that for you. I mean, if you decide to go out and talk about it, there's just so many ways you can go with this.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because I know a lot of people in the neighborhood, and I did in talking, I gave them some little homemade flyers I had. Well, one of them, I was walking out the other day and my neighbor says, "Hey, by the way, I gave this to so-and-so who they're in the book club, and so they're going to get the book and they're going to discuss it." I'm not in the book club because I had so many other things going on, but so I said, "Well, hey, that's really great." So it just kind of spread that way.
So you did flyers?
Yeah, I just made some homemade flyers of the book, and then just put out where it was available. It's nothing overly professional, but people didn't seem to mind.
Yeah, and a book club found you.
Yeah, they did. So I do need to go talk to them. I know who they are. But yeah, she said they were excited.
Go, Judy.
It's something I read where you just have to get out there, even if you're not a social person. Not that I'm not a social, I'm not one that, that goes out and promotes myself.
Well, you know what? There's always a first time.
Yeah. It's something that I have to work on. Yeah.
Okay. Let me know how it works out. Maybe I'll talk to you when you write your next book. Are you going to keep writing?
Well, I wasn't going to, but now as I'm walking, I've kind of got this outline in my mind where I could do a sequel of this book, which I kind of think would be kind of fun. So, okay. Yeah, and I got a couple other things that I'm writing too that are different, a little bit different genre. So, but oh yeah, I have to. I just love writing. I really do. So
great. Thank you, Judy Lundquist, author of Orphan Road: A Journey of Tragedy and Hope. Thanks for talking to me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Alice.
It's been said, when one door closes, another door opens. But in the life of S.C. Houston, sometimes you have to find the door and sometimes you have to force it open. He shares his journey in his book entitled Wings of Youth. Let's see, you were in advertising, you were a pilot, and a couple of other things before you finally found your calling.
I don't know. I guess you could compare me to the phoenix rising from the ashes with an albatross around his neck and a sword of Damocles hanging over me, because that's how I started writing, really. My career field started in the newspaper business. I was a reporter, and that's 50 years ago now, but so technically I was published when I was 22 years old. And journalism was never my area of expertise or what I aspired to do. I just happened to drift into it when I got out of college.
Yeah.
And then, from there, the writing business, journalism business in New Jersey was, I guess you could say, it was a little bit dicey at times because of some of the stuff you covered, New Jersey waterfront, the mob, the Gambino family, all this other stuff. And since my name was on everything I wrote, it could get a little bit tricky sometimes. So I took that background and parlayed that with some art talent, because I'd minored in art when I was in college, and I got into advertising. So I stayed in that field for about 25 years. And I got away from the creative end of it, and I found my way into business management and media buying and such. And I did pretty well. I made good money. I worked for Herman's World of Sporting Goods, and we had an in-house advertising department.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got my start in advertising. Then we went through some restructuring. The company eventually went belly up, and then I landed another job for a while in New Jersey. And then I was enticed out here to Houston by a former boss. And in a similar field, similar situation, ended up as the director of advertising. And then same thing happened again. That company struggled and ran into financial difficulty, and they shut their doors eventually. And I was one of the casualties. So I had to take a deep breath and figure out what I was going to do next. Here I was already in my mid-40s, and I still had kids at home. So I figured, well, okay, I'm already a pilot flying airplanes. Let's pick up some ratings and see if I can develop that into a career. So I did that, and I got my instrument rating, and I bought an airplane, and I was on my way to getting my commercial ticket. Then over the course of an afternoon, I went blind in one eye. And it's all this stuff's in the book, actually. And I've sort of reinvented myself a few times here along the way.
How'd you end up in the Philippines?
Oh, that's where I met my future wife. And so I made a couple of trips to Manila, and because we've been talking online. And so, and that's a story in the book.
Okay.
But, the funny part of all of this before I retired was the last 10 years of my working life I was teaching, because I'd been substitute teaching for a while I was taking flight instruction. And at one point I was selling advertising, independent contractor, and I was doing poorly. And my sales manager said, you're not very good at this. Why don't you substitute teach? And you make more money doing that. So, he was being flippant about it, but I took him serious, and I decided to do that. So I did that while I was doing my flight training.
Good for you.
And it turned out it was a good fit. I decided to get certified to teach. So the last 10 years of my working life, I taught senior English and composition, and getting kids ready for college. And I had a blast. 8 years ago, I retired because my mother required more of my attention at the time. I had to put her in assisted living, and she was up in New Jersey and I was down here. So I had to make frequent trips. And so I retired early. She passed away about a year and a half ago. She was 101. So yeah, she had a good long run. And, it's funny how the writing part of all of this evolved. Similar to the way teaching evolved. 30 odd years ago, I never could envision myself in a classroom full of teenagers. I didn't have the temperament. I didn't have the right mindset. And, one door opened, another closed, and I just happened to drift into it, and it happened at the right time. The writing part of all of this had always been simmering in the back of my mind back in my newspaper reporter days. And it was during a time when I was between advertising gigs that I started picking up a pad and pen again. This is before MS Word or anything like that. So it was pretty labor intensive to sit down and write. And so I crafted a few stories, short stories based on life experiences and observations and such. And I stuck them in a desk, reams of paper, put in a file folder, and I shoved them away in a desk when I got my next job, and forgot about it for a long time until I got into teaching. And, when you teach something, you tend to be a little better at it, or you improve at it. And that's when I started thinking more about writing, and published something in an anthology. There was a story, one of the chapters in my book, it ended up in the book. And then...
What do you mean it ended up in a book?
Well, the story that I wrote was in an anthology about 12, 13 years ago. And I took it out once again during this whole writing process when I was putting together other stories into a book. And I picked this one up again and I tweaked it some more, and I decided, okay, I can find a place for it in the book. But the whole writing process, putting this book together, was almost by accident. I had maybe half a dozen completed short stories, and I sort of stopped and thought one day. I said, what am I going to do with these stories? I'm not going to publish individual short stories. Nobody wants that. They want a book. And I decided that I don't have enough for a book. So I thought about it, and there were some things from my past experiences and observations from teaching that I figured I could write on my own and add to this book. But then after I was married here for the second time, my wife and I would take walks around the neighborhood. And as we walked, I would reminisce and tell her stories about my childhood or about experiences teaching or any given thing. And these walks were long enough so that when I returned, I decided, wait a minute, I've just told her a story and I could put this down on paper. And this is how many of the stories were created during walks and talking them out. And that's how my writing process worked. So I guess by the time I finished, I had maybe about 20 or so chapters, individual stories that could stand on their own. But the thing of it was, I needed a way to tie the stories together. So I used my wife as a literary device. We would have these conversations as we walked, and I used her to string the stories together, one story to the next.
Okay, good. Oh, that's good. That's a great idea.
So we were shifting from present tense to past tense all throughout.
Right.
And that seemed to work in pulling all of these individual stories together. Each story could have stood on its own as a short story, but I didn't want to publish it like that as short stories. I wanted to string them together somehow. So that's how I did it. So.
Okay. So a lot of thought, a lot of stories. Why did you feel the need to publish this now?
Stubbornness. I'm not one to brush something aside and not finish it. And it was almost a compulsion to get it done.
You're a doer.
Yeah, I agonize over something a great deal before I get to it. But once I get to it, I'm stubborn about it.
Yeah, and you're going to get it done. So are you telling people about this? You talking about
ad nauseum. And I have been on Facebook. I'm not a big user of social media, but I suppose I need to be. We've got some things going with the publisher. There's a YouTube video that is going to be distributed, I guess, through social media mainly, a web page that is hosted by the publisher. But I don't still know people on the Houston Chronicle, but I'm sure I could reach out to somebody there. Local schools, the schools that I taught at, might be receptive to a classroom appearance, just letting senior students know that the book is there.
All right, there you go. S.C. Houston, author of Wings of Youth. Thank you.
Okay, Alice, I appreciate it.
Back in the 90s, before jokes were considered offensive, people emailed them and laughed. So says April O'Neil, who saved the ones she was emailed and shares them in her book, 10 You Betty Muds Joke Book. All right, April, let's start with your title.
10 You Betty Muds. It's from a joke. It means thank you very much.
You compiled these for a reason.
Because my stepdad was homebound and I lived in a joke family, a joke household, and he loved jokes. So what I did was I took the jokes that were sent to me via email and I put them in a Word document and I gave it to him. So this was a work of love for my stepdad.
And you did this back in the 90s.
Yes.
So what happened between then and now?
Well, I've always wanted to publish it, but I was scared because I didn't know if I had to credit people, and I didn't know if I would be sued because those aren't my jokes, so that's why I didn't do it. But then I just thought, what the heck?
All right. Tell me what we'll find.
It is just one joke after another. I put little lines in between each joke so that you would know that the next joke is coming up.
Got any favorites for me?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I will tell you a joke right now. What is your name?
Alice.
Hi, Alice. What is your friend's name?
Carolyn.
Marilyn. Okay. Carolyn, Alice, and Amy. We were all sitting around the table drinking our tea. Alice looks over at Carolyn and says, "You know what? My husband, he gave me this here 10-carat diamond ring for our anniversary. Honey child, it is so exquisite. There's not another one like it in the world. He had it special made for me." Carolyn says, "Oh, that's nice." Amy sips her tea quietly and she says, "That's nice." Carolyn looks over at Alice and she says, "Well, you know what? Not to be outdone, but my husband, he took me on a cruise around the world. Honey child, it was so nice. We relaxed, we had fun, we danced, we just did it all." Alice says, "Well, that's nice." Amy sips her tea and she says, "Well, that's nice." They all sit there quietly for a minute. Finally, Alice looks up at Amy and she says, "Well, what did your husband do for you for your anniversary?" Amy just sips her tea quietly and she says, "Well, my husband sent me to charm school." Alice and Carolyn, they both gasped and said, "What? Why on earth did he send you to charm school?" Amy says, "Well," and she sips her tea quietly and she says, "He sent me to charm school so that I would learn how to say 'that's nice' instead of what I really think."
I've heard that joke before.
I love that
That's
joke.
a great joke.
Favorite.
Yeah.
It is my favorite because you can personalize it.
Right. That's nice.
That's nice.
Did you make your stepfather's day? I mean, did he keep this book
yeah.
by his bedside?
Yeah. He read that thing from cover to cover and laughed and laughed.
You got another one for me?
Oh, you know what? Tingy Muds.
Tingerberry Mud. It's thank you very much, right?
Yes, thank you very much. It is a conversation between a room service and a guest. And the guest calls up room service and she says, "Morning, room service." And he says, "I'm sorry, I thought I dialed room service." "Right, room service. Do you wish to order something?" I think I'd like some eggs and bacon." "How'd you like them?" What?" "How'd you like them, Chris?" And it goes from there. And at the very end, the room service lady says, "Tingy Betty Mutts." And he says, "You're welcome."
Okay. Now, I mean, you say there's jokes in there that we couldn't tell anymore.
Oh, just A lot of jokes that are, well, like there's one in there called Bitch, Babe in Total Control of Herself. That's what bitch stands for. So that's in there.
Okay. And you don't think that would fly now these days?
Probably not.
Is it possible because of that people might be like, wow, finally, the jokes I remember, at a time where we weren't under scrutiny for everything we said and every person we hurt or possibly hurt or could hurt, like maybe that'll make your book stand out.
You know what? Probably so. I didn't think about it like that.
Well, I mean, how are you promoting it?
Now, I have promoted it through my work.
Okay. What have you done?
I've advertised it to everyone in the office. And I've got my book on my boss's desk. And people come by and look at it. I am probably going to try and do some sort of book sale at work, because there's a way that we can set up a booth when they have these things available at work.
So you could do a book
I
signing.
could do that. Yeah, I could do that.
Well, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Are you going to keep writing?
Probably not.
Okay. Because you didn't really write this book. This was more of a compilation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Are you glad you did it? How's it feel?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I did it.
All right.
I am glad I did it.
Well, April O'Neil, Tenchuberry Muds, joke book. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You got it.
And thank you for calling.
Over 50 million people, or 42%, are family caregivers in the U.S. Myoshi Mimi Brown was one of them before caregiving became her job. Now she's written Grace Under Pressure 2026 edition, the ultimate guide to managing stress, healing, and empowering your caregiving career. Good timing on this, Myoshi.
So my grandmother, I took care of my grandmother, and when she passed away, I started working at a shelter. So one day I was like, there are people that actually could utilize my character when they're feeling like these individuals. So I will ask myself, is this something that I want to do? Or is this something that I should do? So I kind of spoke to myself and said, you know what, this is where I belong in the caregiving field, because I took care of my grandmother, but it's different when you're taking care of someone else who actually has that. A lot of them have that mind state of either not wanting to live or not having a purpose to live, or just feeling some sort of misery because they don't have family or whatever, because every client is different.
Right.
But it's like when I left from that field into this field, I started to see my questions answered. This client, he asked for me all the time. He didn't want people at his house. He wanted me. So it caused me to be overworked. And then they end up having the client that I work with now, which she will always have like suicidal thoughts of, she didn't want to be here. She didn't have a purpose to live. If it wasn't for her husband, she probably would have killed herself and so forth. So when I would hear those things, when I got into her house, I made her understand that I'm here for her and I need her too. So when we make them feel that way and they start to see it with feeling it, it makes them basically, it's like a reborn again, like a reconcile for the change of the thought, the change of the feelings, and sometimes change in ability, like mobility. Like she couldn't move her legs or her feet. Now all of a sudden she's able to move her feet a little bit. So it's, how can I say this? The reason why I am where I am now in regards to the field, the book, is because I feel like I understand the purpose, the core values of the needs of elders or ones that's in the need of disability and so forth. So that is why I am a caregiver now.
How long have you been a caregiver?
2.5, 3 years now.
So you felt that once you got into caregiving that this was your calling, and you were compelled to write this book to help other people that might be having difficulty dealing with caregiving for loved ones?
Correct. And it really can be very stressful, and it allows the caregiver to be able to work better with the patient. So it's like a tool guide for the caregivers to make a better shift with their patient, or maybe try to understand their patient better, communicate with them instead of getting upset. Maybe it can have different tools that they can use. Like, I laugh a lot. My grandmother kind of taught me that tool. I was always told to smile regardless if I was dealing with difficult situations. It'll keep me looking younger.
Well, in your book, do you cite specific examples?
Yes, ma'am. So when you're dealing with something that's kind of off with the patient and you're feeling overwhelmed, do some sort of humming. That'll kind of take off that stress relief from whatever that's actually going on.
Hum a
Like
song?
humming, like, yes, ma'am.
Okay. What's the biggest stressor for a caregiver?
Not understanding the patient needs.
Okay.
And the reason I say this is because when you know what the patient needs, it's going to make your shift so much more successful. So you have to know how to communicate by showing the patient, because I have to deal with that with my current patient. I have to pull out my phone, or I have to take pictures and things like that, so that her mind would understand it a lot more better than me telling her.
Right.
You don't want to make it seem like that you're trying to overpower what they're trying to explain, because you can do that even when we don't know that we're doing it, and it will frustrate the client gets a little loud, or gets a little upset, and then myself, I have to just kind of step back and kind of evaluate before I address it, because I don't want her to be upset with me, or lash out and say, hey, are you okay today? Is there anything that I can kind of make you feel a little bit more comfortable?
All right. Any thoughts on promoting your book?
So I've been trying to target pretty much everyone that's even outside of the caregiver part, because when you are a parent, that's part of caregiving. Dealing with the same thing, rather it's behaviors or speech or whatever it is. We have to, as parents, have to take that time out and treat our children as if we were a caregiver, because you still have to build that bond. You still have to show the care. You still have to, feed them. You still have to change them. There's pretty much so many similarities. Only difference is the ages. So I've been creating different videos on social media, like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I've gone live a couple of times, letting people know that it's not just about caregivers being overwhelmed, but also parents, that's even just a regular individual dealing with daily life. I've also sent my book to a facility, a nursing home. It's called Upland Village, and they're in Tennessee. I had gave it to the manager, sent it to the manager for her to take a look over and read it. And I explained to her the whole purpose of it was for me to hopefully maybe in the future be able to be some sort of trainer to kind of get the mind state of for the caregivers to understand the actual core values, because it's really different when you're actually taking tests and exams and all that. You really not receiving that mental of how to actually care from someone. It's so much, so different. And she did tell me she's halfway through. She loves the book, and hopefully she'll get back with me in regards to that part. But I am trying to get as many supporters as I can, so that I can get them to understand that they're not in this alone, and they do matter. And it's okay to be overwhelmed, but we have to step back and get our mental together, because we don't want to hurt ourselves or hurt anybody else.
All right, very good. Myoshi Mimi Brown, author of Grace Under Pressure, 2026 edition, The Ultimate Guide to Managing Stress, Healing, and Empowering your caregiving career. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Yes, ma'am.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the Reader House Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.